The girl collapsed in the narrow hallway, clutching the brand-new uniform to her chest. At that very moment, on the other side of the city, a man slammed his fist against the steering wheel so hard it drew blood. Two seemingly distant lives were speeding toward the same fateful turn. That morning, Singapore shimmered like a sheet of glass. The sky poured silver light over Marina Bay, towers reflecting each other into hundreds of mirages. In a cramped room in Geylang, Mira Santos stood before a mirror, adjusting her collar for the 10th time. Her hair was neatly tied back, her black shoes freshly polished, and her heart pounded as if it wanted to escape her chest. She whispered like a prayer, "Today, my story will change." Grace Miller, her roommate, handed her a carefully folded A4 sheet, a list of interview questions, and the answers Mira had memorized all night. "Breathe. Go and shine," Grace said with a soft smile that hid the uncertainty both of them carried. Mira nodded, squeezing her friend's hand. Inside her thin wallet were a bus ticket, a cheap lipstick, and just enough hope to warm a morning. Bay Regent Hotel stood ahead like a white ship docked by the bay. The lobby smelled faintly of orchids. Mira walked in, her palms damp with sweat. The interview room was bright and cold. A volley of questions came at her, cleaning procedures, housekeeping standards, handling guest complaints, and she answered each one clearly, her voice shaky at first, then steady. She spoke about working night shifts in a diner, about folding towels into flowers, about how a smile was the cheapest yet most valuable ticket in service. When the manager finally looked up and said, "Congratulations, you're hired," the words landed in Mira's chest like a falling star, bright, hot, and so unreal she had to step outside, lean against the cool stone wall, and cry. Her tears weren't weakness, but relief, because finally the door had opened. As Mira held her new uniform close, across town in Orchard, Adrian Cole slammed a folder shut on his desk. 34 years old, CEO of Cole Ventures. His face was on magazine covers, his smile present at every signing ceremony. But today, that smile shattered. He had just received a call. His trusted partner had vanished, taking a large sum of money. An old story in a new world. "Traitor!" Adrian hissed through clenched teeth, the veins in his hand bulging. The numbers on his screen began to bleed red. Stalled projects, restless investors, and the media already sensing trouble. He stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city glittered as if mocking him. From that height, power was easy to mistake for air. But today, the air was thick, almost unbreathable. His phone buzzed again. "The lawyer is on his way," his assistant said. Adrian froze, suddenly feeling the hollow inside his chest. Everything he'd built seemed solid, until one act of betrayal cracked its foundation. "You let your emotions fall asleep," a voice inside him whispered. Grabbing his car keys like a lifeline, he stormed into the parking lot. The engine roared, music pounded in his head, and all he wanted was to escape that suffocating room filled with signatures that once promised loyalty. The sun slid past the crown of Marina Bay sands. Myra returned home, clutching a thin envelope, her probationary contract. She and Grace hugged, spinning in circles, laughter bursting out of them like a dance of freedom. "Tonight, let's go out," Grace cheered. "Celebrate. Nothing fancy, just joy." Mira hesitated. She still had to save for electricity and groceries, but Grace's bright, hopeful eyes made every calculation fade. "Okay," Mira smiled. "Just one night." The scene shifted fast. A black SUV glided down the boulevard. Inside it, Adrian gripped the steering wheel, eyes red with exhaustion. He flicked on the turn signal, not toward his office, not toward home, but into the darkness where music drowned out thought. Clark Key gleamed ahead like a string of fireworks. Back in the Geylang flat, Mira smoothed out a simple black dress. No jewelry, no perfume, just a thin layer of lipstick, and a heart racing with anticipation for tomorrow, her first real day in uniform. Grace adjusted her strap, gazing at her as if seeing a future taking shape. "You're not just cleaning rooms," Grace said, half joking, half serious. "You're cleaning up your life." Night draped the city like a sheet of velvet blue. Along the riverside, lights shimmered, glasses clinked, laughter spilled over the water. Mira stepped into the glow, a small dot in a sea of people. She didn't know that across that same river of light, a man sat, hunched over his first drink of the night. Two heartbeats that had never met were already moving toward each other. The pace slowed, like a deep breath, like a deep... Mira looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you for giving me a chance." In a dark corner, Adrian closed his eyes and murmured, "Just one night. Tomorrow I'll rise again." And as with every great story, destiny didn't knock. It simply left the door open. On the upper floor of the entertainment district, a hotel room door stood ajar, letting the wind drift through, and soon 2 lives would cross, in a way neither could ever have imagined. The music tore through the air, lights shifting in a frenzy like the heartbeat of the entire city. Clark Quay that night was a sleepless carnival, a whirl of color and sound. Lines of people stretched outside the club, the air thick with perfume, beer, and hunger. In the middle of the crowd, Mira Santos, dressed in a simple black dress, stood slightly behind her best friend, Grace Miller, trying to hide her shyness behind a forced smile. "Just tonight, Mira," Grace shouted over the music, pulling her toward the dance floor. "You deserve a little happiness." Mira laughed, shaking her head, but soon joined in. They danced, sang, and laughed. 2 young women who had just brushed against their first glimpse of hope in years. But Mira's joy didn't last. A dull ache began to pulse at the back of her head. She had taken a strong painkiller before leaving home, a cheap one bought from a convenience store. Now, the medicine, mixed with the heavy air of alcohol, making her dizzy. "Grace, I feel a bit lightheaded," Mira murmured, her voice fading. "Do you want to go home?" Grace asked. Mira shook her head and tried to smile. "Maybe I just need to sit for a while." She slipped away from the crowd, following the stairway that led up to the hotel above the club. No one noticed. In the dim light, she saw a door slightly ajar, a sliver of warm yellow spilling through. She knocked softly. No answer. In her haze, Mira pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was quiet, smelling faintly of oak and whiskey. On the table, half-finished glasses still held the echo of a night gone wild. She touched the edge of the bed, her heart pounding. Her body felt drained of strength. Mira fell onto the mattress and closed her eyes. She didn't know that the room had already been reserved for someone else. Downstairs, Adrian Cole slammed his 5th glass of whiskey onto the table. His eyes were bloodshot, his voice hoarse with rage. Hugh, his personal manager, stood nearby, uneasy. "Boss, maybe you should rest. Let me take you to your room." Adrian scoffed. "Rest? When the whole world is laughing at me?" "You've had enough to drink," Hugh said carefully. "Not enough to forget," Adrian muttered bitterly. Hugh helped him to his feet and guided him into the private elevator. When the door to the room opened, Adrian let himself fall onto the bed with a heavy sigh. But someone was already there, a small figure lying still, breathing softly in deep sleep. Her dark hair covered half her face. In his drunken haze, Adrian squinted, assuming Hugh had arranged company for him to ease his loneliness. He didn't question it. He simply sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the unfamiliar face. There was something pure about her, something tender in the scent of sweat mingled with cheap perfume. He brushed a strand of hair from her pillow. "An angel lost in hell," he whispered. And in that haze of liquor and pain, Adrian let his heart drift to a place where reason no longer existed. That night, two strangers found each other in the dark, without names, without words, only breath against breath and emptiness, filled by a single mistaken moment. When dawn brushed against the glass windows of the Bay Regent Hotel, Mira stirred. The ache in her head lingered. She opened her eyes to an unfamiliar room, bathed in soft golden light, seeping through cream curtains. The faint scent of men's cologne hung in the air. She bolted upright, stunned. On the pillow beside her was the imprint of someone who had lain there. Next to it, a gold necklace, engraved with the words A. Coal gleamed under the morning sun. A few neatly folded bills sat on the table beside it. Mira looked around. The room was empty. Her hands trembled as she touched the chain, her fingers cold as ice. What happened?" she whispered. Her memory was a blur, the music, the stairs, the golden light. And then darkness. A wave of fear rose inside her, and tears spilled uncontrollably. She grabbed the money and the necklace, stuffed them into her bag, and ran. The hallway stretched endlessly, every echo of her footsteps sounding like an accusation. When she burst out of the hotel, the morning sunlight hit her face so hard she squeezed her eyes shut. She stood frozen on the street, not knowing where to go. High above, in another room of the same hotel, Adrian Cole woke from his drunken sleep. The light stabbed through his skull. He reached for his neck. The familiar chain was gone. "Must have left it somewhere," he muttered, unaware that along with that chain, a piece of his life had also slipped away. And Mira, with tear-swollen eyes, boarded the first bus of the morning. In her palm, the gold necklace still felt warm. She held it tightly, as if letting go would make everything vanish. She didn't know that in that very moment, a chain of unthinkable events had already begun, where one night's mistake would turn into destiny, and a single necklace would bind together two worlds that were never meant to meet. 3 days after that night, the sky over Singapore poured endlessly. Rain hammered against the old tin roof, each drop sounding like fingers tapping on Mira's heart. She sat curled in the corner of her small, rented room, the gold necklace resting on her palm, its pale shimmer casting faint light across her stunned face. She couldn't bring herself to touch it for long. Every glance made her chest tighten, from shame, from fear, and from the haunting question of what had truly happened that night. Grace Miller leaned against the doorway, her eyes red and swollen. "Mira, are you ever going to tell me what really happened?" Mira stayed silent for a long time before finally exhaling and whispering, "All I remember are the lights, the stairs, and then nothing. When I woke up, he was gone. Only this necklace and some money were left." Grace sat beside her, holding her hand gently. "Maybe you were drugged, or went into the wrong room." Mira shook her head as tears welled up. "I don't know, but Grace, I'm scared. So scared." In the days that followed, Mira buried herself in work. She arrived at the hotel early, left late, forced smiles, and tried to bury her memories deep inside. But every night, the image of that pale golden room returned. The necklace engraved A. Cole was hidden beneath her pillow in a small cloth pouch, both strange and haunting, a reminder she couldn't escape. Then one morning, Mira suddenly felt faint during her shift. Her vision blurred, her hands shook, and the tray of glasses slipped from her grip, crashing onto the floor. The manager frowned. "Are you all right?" "Yes, sir, just a little tired." But the exhaustion didn't fade. For the next week, it grew worse. The smell of food made her nauseous, and whenever she stood too long, her vision swam. Grace watched her with concern. "Mira, you should see a doctor. Maybe it's anemia, but it could also be something else." "Something else?" Grace didn't answer, but her eyes said everything. That day, Mira went to a small clinic in the Bugis area. The sharp scent of disinfectant made her stomach churn. She filled out the form with trembling hands. The doctor requested a test, and the wait for the results felt like an eternity. When the door finally opened, a nurse smiled and said, "Congratulations, the test is positive. You're about 4 weeks pregnant." The words hit Mira like a lightning strike. She stared at the nurse, unable to process the language coming out of her mouth. "What did you say?" "You're pregnant," the nurse repeated gently, as if it were good news. But for Mira, it was thunder on a clear day. On her way home, rain lashed her face, but she didn't feel it. She walked like a ghost, her fist clenched around the crumpled test results. Back in her room, she sank to the floor, staring blankly at the damp wall as tears streamed down her cheeks. Why me? Why now, just when I started to hope? Why would God send me this? When Grace came home and saw her friend sitting there, she rushed over in panic. "Mira, what's wrong? You're scaring me." Mira looked up, her face streaked with tears. Her voice cracked. I'm pregnant." The room fell into heavy silence. Grace's mouth opened, but no words came. "Are you sure?" she finally whispered. The doctor confirmed it. 1 month. Grace dropped beside her, wrapping her arms around Mira. "Oh my God, what are you going to do?" Mira shook her head, sobbing. "I don't know. I don't know who he is. Don't know his name. Don't even know his face. All I have is this necklace." She reached under her pillow and took out the chain. It glimmered in the weak light. Beautiful, yet cruel. Grace held it up and read the engraving. A. Cole. Maybe that's his name. Adrian? Andrew? Someone with the last name. Cole. Mira's hands trembled. But how do we find him? There must be hundreds of people named Cole in Singapore. "Then we start looking," Grace said firmly. "We can't just sit and wait." The next day, they returned to Clark Quay. By daylight, the bars were closed and the streets looked pale and empty. Mira stepped into the same club, her heart pounding. The manager eyed them suspiciously. "Can I help you?" Grace spoke up. "My friend accidentally entered a hotel room above this club 3 weeks ago. She only remembers this necklace." She held it up. The manager glanced at it and shook his head. "Never seen it before. We get a lot of rich guests here. No one can remember them all." A cleaner passed by, and Grace quickly stopped her. "Miss, do you remember a very drunk man being taken upstairs that night?" The woman thought for a moment, then sighed. "There's one every night. Who can keep track?" Hope flickered out. Mira stood motionless in the empty hall, clutching the necklace, her head bowed. "No one knows. No one remembers," she whispered. Grace placed a hand on her shoulder. "Maybe God is testing you, Mira, but you have to live. Not for you, for the baby." Mira turned, tears shimmering in her eyes. She gently placed her hand over her still flat stomach, already carrying a storm. "I don't know who the father is," she said softly, "but I won't abandon my child, no matter what. It's my blood." Outside, the rain kept falling, as if the sky itself couldn't stop crying. But inside that tiny room, between fear and tears, a fragile life had begun to grow, along with a silent promise from a mother who swore to protect her child with everything she had left. The first months of Mira's pregnancy dragged on like a broken clock. Her body changed little by little, but she didn't dare tell anyone at the Bay Regent Hotel. Her uniform grew tighter by the day, the buttons straining each time she bent over. She hid her growing belly beneath a thick apron, trying to work faster, harder, as if speed could fool the eyes around her. But her body refused to be deceived. Fatigue seeped into every step she took. Each morning, when the alarm rang, she had to summon all her strength just to sit up. The smell of cleaning solution made her nauseous, and the sound of the vacuum cleaner drilled into her skull. "You look pale," Grace said worriedly. "Tell the manager you need a few days off." "I can't," Mira replied hoarsely. "If I ask for leave, they'll fire me for good." So she kept working, hiding her dizziness behind weary smiles. But trouble came one humid afternoon. While changing the sheets in room 506, her vision blurred, the room spun, and the tray of glasses in her hand slipped, shattering on the floor. The sound of breaking glass brought the manager rushing in. "Mira! What on earth are you doing?" I'm sorry, I just felt a little dizzy." "You've been dizzy for weeks. Guests have complained that the rooms aren't clean, that you're too slow. Do you think this hotel is a place for sick people to rest?" His voice cracked like a whip. Mira bowed her head, tears splashing onto the tiles. "I'm sorry. I'll do better." "No need," he cut her off coldly. "Pack your things. We need workers, not the weak." The door slammed shut. Mira stood frozen, her hands trembling, her throat tight. Her staff badge slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a dry click, the sound of a dream breaking. That afternoon, she sat on a concrete bench behind the hotel as rain drizzled down, soaking through her uniform. Inside her bag were only a few coins and the crumpled pregnancy report. She looked at the blurred words, rainwater smearing the ink as if trying to erase the truth. "I lost my job," she whispered when Grace found her. Grace knelt beside her, gripping her hands tightly. "It's okay, we'll figure something out." Mira gave a broken laugh that caught like a sob. "Something else? I have no parents, no family, and now I have a child who hasn't even been born. Who would hire me?" The rain grew heavier. Grace pulled Mira into her arms and held her tight. "You're not alone. We'll make it work. I promise." That night, in their damp little room, Mira sat before the mirror, staring at her exhausted reflection. She took off the A-Cole necklace and placed it in a small wooden box. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice dissolving into the sound of the rain. No answer came, only distant thunder, and within her the tiny life stirred softly, as if to say, "Mama, don't leave me." Mira closed her eyes, cradling her belly, whispering, "I won't. Even if I have to start over, I'll keep going." Outside, the rain kept pouring, but inside that small room, the faint glow of an oil lamp still burned, fragile yet steady, like the heart of a young mother who had lost everything except her faith. 5 years passed, like wind sweeping over old rooftops. In a quiet corner of Tiong Bahru, among faded yellow houses with peeling paint, Mira Santos rose at dawn, tied her hair neatly, and put on a worn-out apron. She had long stopped crying. Now, instead of tears, her face carried the calm of someone who had learned to live with storms. In the tiny room that barely fit 2 wooden beds and an old dining table, a bright little voice rang out, "Mommy, I finished brushing my teeth." It was Lila, 4 years old, with round black eyes and a smile as radiant as morning light. She was, in every sense, the miracle of Mira's life. Mira smiled, wiped her hands on her apron, and bent down to tie her daughter's hair. "Be good at school today, okay? Don't run around like yesterday." "Yes, I promise," Lila replied earnestly, before breaking into a big grin. Before leaving the house, Mira glanced at the corner of the wardrobe, where a small wooden box was carefully tucked away. Inside, the gold necklace, engraved with A. Cole still rested there, silent, like a secret time refused to erase. Each time she looked at it, her heart tightened, yet warmth spread through her chest, It was a symbol of her pain, but also the beginning of the life that became Lila. Life hadn't been kind. After giving birth, Mira did every job she could find, washing dishes, doing laundry for others, cleaning rich people's houses. Her once delicate hands were now rough and calloused, but her eyes still held their quiet strength. For nearly 2 years, Mira had been working as a waitress in a small diner near Outram Road. The pay was meager, but enough to cover rent and buy Lila a new toy or two at the end of each month. Every afternoon after her shift, she picked Lila up from the little preschool tucked in an alley. The girl would run into her arms, wrapping herself around Mira's neck, the scent of sunshine in her hair blending with her mother's familiar scent of soap and sweat. To Mira, that was the happiest moment of her day. At night, as the city lights shimmered outside, the two sat on the floor together, Lila coloring with her crayons, while Mira mended her torn uniform. Sometimes the child would look up with innocent curiosity and ask, "Mommy, everyone else has a daddy. Where's mine?" The question pierced Mira's heart like a tiny blade. She stayed silent for a long time, then rose, opened the wooden box, and took out the necklace. The light reflected softly off the pendant. "Look," Mira said gently, "this belonged to your father. I don't know where he is, but he left this for you. You must keep it safe, all right?" Lila's eyes widened with wonder. "It's so pretty, I'll take care of it. This will be my treasure." Mira nodded and softly placed the necklace around her daughter's neck. Lila beamed, her eyes sparkling with pride. "Now I have a daddy, Mommy," she said, her voice so full of joy that Mira couldn't hold back her tears. That night, when Lila was fast asleep, Mira sat quietly watching her. She brushed a hand through her daughter's soft hair, her heart swelling with gratitude. Life had taken everything from her, her youth, her dignity, her career, but it had given her a reason to keep going. And in that peaceful moment, Mira didn't know that across the city, a man stood by the window of his luxurious penthouse, touching his neck, and realizing that the gold necklace engraved A. Cole had been missing for years, along with a piece of his life he never even knew existed. On the top floor of the Cole Ventures building, the bright morning light streamed through the glass windows, reflecting off the expensive Swiss watch on Adrian Cole's wrist. He sat behind a large ebony desk, the files neatly stacked before him, but his eyes were distant, empty. Over the past 5 years, his career had climbed back to its peak. The company recovered, the stocks soared, and his name once again graced the covers of magazines. Yet when the spotlight faded, all that remained was him and the cold, echoing silence. Sometimes Adrian still reached for his neck, where he used to wear the gold necklace engraved with A. Cole, a gift from his mother before she passed away. He had searched for it for years, scouring hotel records, contacting dozens of employees, but no one knew when it had vanished. "It's just an old keepsake," he told himself, but every time he thought about it, a dull ache pressed against his chest, as if a fragment of his soul had disappeared along with it. The office door opened. Bianca Rossi entered, the click of her heels soft against the wooden floor, a confident smile curling on her lips. "You don't knock anymore?" Adrian asked, his tone softening at the sight of her. Bianca tilted her head playfully, laughing. "Since when does a woman need to knock before entering her man's office?" She placed a cup of coffee on his desk, then wrapped her arms around him from behind, breathing in the scent of his cologne. "You didn't sleep again last night, did you?" Adrian nodded slightly. "Just had a few contracts to review." Bianca's arms tightened around his neck, her voice low, laced with intent. "I have good news for you." Adrian looked up. "What is it?" She smiled and took his hand, placing it gently on her stomach. "I'm pregnant." The air froze for a moment. Then, like a current of electricity, Adrian shot to his feet. "What did you say?" Bianca met his gaze steadily and nodded. "Yes. We're going to have a baby." For an instant, the carefully composed expression on Adrian's face gave way to pure astonishment. Then, emotion flooded through him. He pulled her into his arms, laughing with relief. "My God! Bianca, you can't imagine how happy I am. After everything, this is exactly what I needed." Bianca rested her head on his shoulder, her eyes flickering with calculation. A flash that vanished as quickly as it appeared. That afternoon, her phone lit up with a video call from her best friend, Clara Hunt. On the screen, Clara grinned as Bianca flaunted her newly adorned hand, a diamond ring gleaming in the light. "He bought it?" Clara asked, laughing. "He believes everything," Bianca replied with triumph in her voice. "He said he wants to meet my parents soon." "Clara, your plan was genius." Clara shrugged, smirking. "I just told you the truth." Men like Adrian, rich, stoic, terrified of public scandal, the moment they hear the word child, they'll never walk away. "I do feel a little guilty," Bianca murmured, though her eyes betrayed not an ounce of remorse. "Guilty?" Clara scoffed. "You love him, don't you? Then hold on to him, whatever it takes." Meanwhile, across the city, in a small diner tucked near Outram Road, Mira was washing the last dishes of the evening shift. Her hands were wrinkled from soap and water, but when she looked up and saw Lila running toward her, humming a tune, her exhaustion melted away. She bent down and kissed her daughter's forehead. "You were such a good girl. Tomorrow I'll take the day off. We'll go to the park, okay?" No one knew that in two very different corners of the same city, two women carried entirely different things within them. One carried a lie meant to bind power, and the other carried a living truth, a 4-year-old girl. The proof of a night fate had yet to finish speaking about. And it was only a matter of time before those two worlds collided, exposing every secret under a light that no one could hide from. That afternoon, the Singapore sun blazed down as if determined to set the city on fire. In the small room in Tiong Bahru, Mira Santos was struggling against a high fever. The heat, radiating from her forehead, dried the wet cloth almost instantly. Sweat soaked through her collar, sticking to her skin. Every time she tried to sit up, her head spun and her vision dimmed. "Lila," she whispered weakly. The little girl ran from the corner of the room, clutching her old doll. "Mommy, are you sick again?" she asked, her voice full of worry. Mira nodded and pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket, a doctor's prescription. "Take this money and go to the pharmacy down the street," she said softly. "Show them this paper, and they'll know what medicine I need. But remember, don't lose your necklace, all right?" Lila nodded eagerly, her eyes bright with determination. "I'll be fast. Wait for me, Mommy." She tucked the money into her pocket, grabbed the prescription, and dashed out of the room. The heat outside hit like waves of fire. Cars gleamed as they sped past. Pedestrians hurried under umbrellas. Lila ran through the crowd, wiping away her tears as she clutched the gold necklace around her neck. A coal, the one thing her mother had told her never to lose. Meanwhile, a sleek black SUV rolled slowly through the same neighborhood from the opposite direction. Inside, Adrian Cole stared out the tinted window, lost in thought. The news of the baby Bianca Rossi claimed to be carrying still echoed in his mind. He should have felt joy, but instead there was a heaviness in his chest. Something didn't feel right. "I'm going to be a father," he murmured. But there was no spark of happiness in his heart, only an emptiness he couldn't name. As the car turned a corner, Adrian froze. A small girl was running across the street, her sandals nearly slipping off, her face streaked with sweat and tears. The driver hit the brakes just in time. "Stop the car," Adrian ordered sharply. He opened the door and stepped out quickly, as if something beyond logic was pulling him forward. Kneeling down, he saw the little girl clutching a wrinkled piece of paper in one hand and a gold necklace gleaming on her chest. "Hey there, sweetheart. Why are you crying? Where are you going?" he asked, his voice softening. Lila looked up at him, her eyes wet. "My mommy's sick. I'm buying medicine for her." Adrian frowned. "You're alone?" The girl nodded, tears dripping onto the prescription. He looked closer, and then he saw it. The necklace. Sunlight glinted across the pendant, clearly revealing the engraving. A. Cole. The world seemed to stop. Adrian's heart missed a beat. His hand trembled as he pointed at the necklace. Where did you get that?" Lila stepped back, her small hands gripping it protectively. "You can't touch it. Mommy said it's from my daddy. No one can take it." Adrian felt the air leave his lungs. "From your daddy?" he repeated, his voice breaking. "Yes," Lila said, her dark eyes shining. "Mommy said it's something Daddy left for me. I've worn it since I was little." Adrian's hands shook uncontrollably. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. But the necklace was real. The very one he had lost 5 years ago. Questions raced through his mind. Who was this child? Who was her mother? How could she have his necklace? He crouched down, his tone gentle. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "I'm Lila Santos," she replied. The surname made him pause. It wasn't familiar, didn't belong to anyone in his world. But those eyes, wide, dark, and innocent, there was something hauntingly familiar about them. "Where do you live, Lila?" Right there, across the street, she pointed toward a narrow alley. "Mommy's waiting for me." Adrian straightened up and turned to his driver. "Buy everything on this prescription, now." Then he knelt again, holding out his hand. "Can you take me to your mommy?" Lila nodded. Their hands, one large, one tiny, clasped together in the bustling crowd. The necklace engraved A. Cole swayed gently on the little girl's chest, catching the sunlight like a guiding flame. Adrian followed her, his heart pounding, his breath heavy. He didn't know what he was about to find, only that from that moment on, the past he thought was buried was rising again, in the form of a small child holding his hand tightly, leading him toward the doorway of destiny. The narrow alley leading to the rundown housing block was so tight that only one person could walk through at a time. On both sides, the walls were stained and peeling. Electrical wires hung overhead like tangled webs. Adrian had to duck as he followed Lila, his expensive leather shoes picking up dust, his clothes absorbing the damp, musty smell of poverty. With every step, his heart grew heavier. He, a man who had lived in a penthouse lit through the night, was now walking into a world he had never imagined, a place where even hardship had its own scent. "We're here," Lila said, pointing to a crooked wooden door at the end of the alley. "This is my home." Adrian stood still for a moment. The door in front of him was chipped, the handle rusted, and water stains spread along the bottom. The little girl pushed it open, her voice bright and excited. "Mommy, I'm back! I brought the medicine, and I brought a nice man to help." Inside, Mira Santos was sitting against the wall, her face pale, her hair damp with sweat. At the sound of her daughter's voice, she looked up, and her eyes met Adrian Cole's. The world inside her froze. He was tall, refined, but that face, it felt hauntingly familiar, like something she had seen in a dream half remembered from 5 years ago, and Adrian, seeing her, felt his heartbeat stutter. Her face was frail and weary, yet her eyes stirred something inside him, as though a forgotten memory had been pulled from the dark. "Mommy, this is Mr. Adrian," Lila announced, setting the bag of medicine on the bed. "He helped me buy it for you." Mira struggled to sit up. Thank you so much," she whispered. "No need to thank me," Adrian said softly, stepping closer. He poured water, handed her the pills, and spoke with quiet concern. "Take these, you'll feel better." Steam rose from the glass, mingling with the smell of damp wood and medicated oil. For a fleeting moment, Adrian felt something strange, a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He looked around the small room. The walls were covered with childish crayon drawings. An old table held 2 mismatched bowls, and a photo of Mira and Lila smiling in a park was taped crookedly to the wall. His voice lowered. "How long have you lived here?" "For a while now," Mira replied softly. "It's just me and my daughter. All we need is a roof, even if it's small." Adrian nodded. Everything here was a world apart from his life. But what held his gaze was the gold necklace around Lila's neck. It swayed gently with her breathing, catching the dim light of the room. He swallowed hard, then asked carefully, "May I ask something? That necklace your daughter is wearing, where did it come from?" Mira froze. She looked at her daughter, then back at him, her voice slow and hesitant. "It belonged to her father." "Her father?" Adrian repeated, his breath catching. "Yes. 5 years ago," her voice trembled, her hands clutching the blanket. "I had just gotten a job at the Bay Regent Hotel. My friend asked me to go celebrate. I felt dizzy and went upstairs looking for a place to rest. I must have fallen asleep in a room with the door open. When I woke up, the man who'd been there was gone. All that was left was that necklace." Adrian went still. The air in the room thickened. The woman in his blurred memory, the face he could never recall from that drunken night, was now right in front of him, frail and shaking, with the child who carried his blood. His voice broke as he whispered, "That necklace, it's mine." Mira's eyes widened. "What did you say?" Adrian slowly unbuttoned his collar, revealing a faint scar on his neck, the mark left by that very chain. "I lost it 5 years ago, at the Bay Regent." Silence swallowed the room. Mira gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. "Oh my God, no, it can't be." Adrian looked down at Lila, the little girl sitting between them, eyes wide and innocent, unaware of the storm swirling around her. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Lila, I'm your father." Lila blinked. "Really?" Mira burst into tears, while Adrian knelt down and gently brushed his hand over his daughter's soft hair. His tears fell too, for the first time in years. He lifted his gaze to Mira, his tone deep and resolute. "I can't change the past, but I can make it right. Let me take care of you both. Let me start over." Mira, caught between shock and tears, could only stare at him, the man who had once been the shadow of a painful night, now speaking as a father, as someone desperate to make amends. Outside, the afternoon sun poured into the narrow alley, golden and warm. The light slipped through the small window, falling across the faces of all three, as if to say that even the most painful truth could still be the beginning of a new kind of miracle. That late afternoon, the sleek black SUV stopped in front of Cole Mansion, the white villa by the Sentosa shore, where the scent of salt and jasmine mingled with the sea breeze. The iron gates opened, and the guards froze as they saw Adrian Cole step out, his hand supporting Mira, while little Lila skipped excitedly beside them. "Is this your house, mister?" Lila asked, her wide eyes sparkling as she stopped in awe at the sight of the endless green lawn. Adrian bent down with a gentle smile. "No, sweetheart. This is our home." Inside, light from the crystal chandeliers spilled across the marble floor. Mira stood motionless, overwhelmed by the grandeur, high ceilings, sweeping staircases, antique paintings on every wall. She didn't know whether to stand or sit. Awe mingled with fear in her chest. But when Lila ran through the room laughing, Mira's heart began to soften. Adrian watched the two of them, and for the first time, peace settled in his eyes. "Think of this as your home," he said quietly. "If you need anything, just tell me." "Thank you, but "No buts," he interrupted gently. "I've already lost too many years, Mira." In that moment, Lila ran up and wrapped her arms around his leg. "I love this place. Can I sleep here with Mommy?" Adrian smiled and lifted her into his arms. "Of course, my little princess." The brief happiness didn't last long. 3 hours later, as the sunset cast its golden light through the tall windows, Bianca Rossi, the woman Adrian once thought he would marry, arrived. The doors opened, and the sound of her high heels echoed coldly across the floor. She froze when she saw a strange woman and a child standing inside her home. "Adrian," she said, her voice icy. "Who are they?" Mira stood up awkwardly. "Hello, You don't need to speak," Bianca snapped, her gaze sweeping from Mira's head to toe with disdain. "What is a woman like you doing here?" "She's my guest," Adrian said, his voice dropping low. "Guest? With that child?" Bianca sneered. "You bring them into this house as if they're family?" Mira clutched her daughter's hand. "If we're causing trouble, we'll leave." No sooner had she spoken than Bianca lunged forward and shoved her. Mira staggered back, and Lila slipped, falling hard against the doorway. A cry pierced the air. "Lila!" Mira screamed, rushing to her daughter. Blood trickled down the child's cheek. Bianca stood frozen, her breath uneven, then turned sharply. That's the price for walking into a place where you don't belong. The door slammed shut. Wind gusted through the hall, cold and sharp. Mira knelt beside her child, trembling as she pressed a cloth against the wound. Hours later, when Adrian's car returned to the mansion, he found them sitting on the front steps, drenched from the night mist. Lila's head resting on her mother's lap, the dried blood still visible on her cheek. Adrian ran to them and dropped to his knees. "What happened?" Mira broke into tears. "She threw us out. Lila fell." Adrian's eyes darkened. He lifted his daughter into his arms, holding her tightly. "No one will ever hurt my child." Rage surged within him like the waves crashing beyond the shore. He carried Lila back inside, then turned to Mira. "From this moment on, no one will ever force you or her out of this house, not even her." Outside, thunder cracked across the clear sky. Inside, the real storm had just begun. That night, thunder rolled over the Sentosa coast, echoing against the tall glass walls of the mansion. Adrian Cole stood in the dim hallway, holding the small hand of Lila, who had fallen asleep after her fever. The cut on her cheek had been bandaged, but the fire of anger still burned in his chest. He pushed open the living room door with force. Bianca Rossi sat inside, a glass of wine trembling in her hand. "Adrian, please let me explain." "Explain what?" His voice was so cold, it froze the air. "You threw a 4-year-old child out of my house. You pushed my daughter, Bianca." Bianca froze, her lips quivering. "Your daughter? What did you just say?" Adrian stepped closer, his eyes blazing. "Yes, my daughter, my blood." The truth hit like a blade. Bianca stumbled backward, her glass crashing to the floor. You can't be serious." "I am," he said, his tone dark and low. "And what about you? You lied to me, made up a pregnancy just to keep me trapped." Bianca's face went pale. "Who told you that?" "You did," Adrian said sharply. "I was outside your room when you called Clara. I heard everything. Pretend to be pregnant so he won't leave. You thought I'd marry you out of pity." The air turned heavy. Bianca broke into tears and rushed forward. "Adrian, I did it because I love you. I was scared of losing you." Adrian shook his head, stepping back. Real love doesn't need lies. If you ever loved me, you wouldn't have pushed away the people who truly belonged in my life. He pointed to the door, his voice final. Leave. Tonight. Bianca's breath hitched, her eyes brimming with tears, but she said nothing more. Grabbing her bag, she turned and walked out into the rain. The sound of her heels faded into the night, leaving only thunder and the heavy rhythm of Adrian's breathing. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, falling on Mira's face as she sat beside her daughter's bed. Lila was awake, smiling faintly. Mommy, I dreamed that Daddy, carried me and we flew high in the sky. Mira smiled through tears. Yes, my love, your father won't ever let you fall again. Adrian entered quietly. He looked at Mira. His eyes softened after the storm of the night. Thank you for taking care of our daughter for 5 long years. Mira shook her head, her voice trembling. I only did what any mother would do. No, he said gently, you did what an angel would do. You saved my soul. He knelt beside the bed, holding Lila's hand, then looked at Mira. Come home with me, truly. I want both of you here, not as guests, not as a secret, but as family. Mira stared at him for a long moment, her eyes glistening. She had once feared him, even resented him, but now the man before her was not the cold billionaire she remembered. He was a father, trembling with emotion. And somewhere deep down, her heart had already forgiven him. She nodded softly. If you truly want to be a father, then start today, not with money, but with love. Adrian smiled, his eyes shining. That's the one thing I've been missing. Days later, Cole Mansion was filled with laughter. Lila ran across the garden, while Mira sat under the porch reading, sunlight falling across her shoulders. Adrian watched from afar, his heart finally at peace. For the first time in years, he felt at home. That afternoon, they visited Victor Cole, Adrian's father. The elderly man froze when he saw the child and the gold necklace glinting on her neck. That little girl is wearing our family's necklace? Adrian smiled, taking his daughter's hand. No, father, I'm the one who wore it. I lost it 5 years ago, and today it has returned, in the form of your granddaughter. Victor looked at Lila, then at Mira, his tired eyes brightening. He stepped forward, embracing the child tightly. Welcome home, Lila, he said, his voice breaking. That night, in the garden swept by the sea breeze, Mira rested her head on Adrian's shoulder as the stars glittered above. I used to think that necklace was a curse, she whispered, but it turned out to be the path that led us back to each other. Adrian held her hand, gazing into the eyes of the woman who had become his destiny. You and our daughter brought me home, not to this mansion, but to where I truly belong, inside the heart of a family. Nearby, Lila laughed, lifting the necklace toward the moonlight. The golden glow shimmered across their faces, 3 souls who had endured loss, deception, and forgiveness, now bound together in the gentlest light of all, the light of true love. The story of Mira Santos comes to an end, yet its echoes drift on like the Sentosa sea breeze at dusk. From a woman once crushed by fate, she rose again as a mother, as a nurturer of hope, not through power or wealth, but through courage and love. And Adrian Cole, the man who once believed success was the highest point of life, finally understood that true worth isn't found in towers of glass, but in the small arms of a child calling him father. The A, Cole necklace, once a symbol of mistake and loss, became a sign of redemption and reunion. It bound 2 souls who thought they had lost each other forever and opened a new chapter, one where forgiveness triumphed over the past and love healed every wound. On the shores of Sentosa, the sunset melted into the sea, reflecting three figures walking hand in hand along the sand: Adrian, Mira, and Lila. The waves whispered softly, the sky shifted its colors, and the sound of the little girl's laughter mingled with the wind like a gentle finale to a journey once filled with tears, but now radiant with light. And if anyone should ask, what makes a person truly strong? Remember Mira's answer. It's not when we have everything, but when we've lost it all and still choose to love. If this story touched your heart, share it. Somewhere out there, someone standing in the middle of their storm may need to be reminded that light will always return as long as we keep believing in the goodness of the world.